Kia ora and welcome to our first council meeting of 2026, and I'm going to ask Councillor Mel Courtney to begin with a karakia, please. Karakia. Can I just note Councillor Matty Anderson is not so well and is joining us by Zoom. And Matty, hopefully you can hear us all loud and clear. And can I tell you from the chair, anybody that is feeling unwell and is able to join the meeting by Zoom, I will always approve those applications. In terms of just practicality, there's never a question if anybody's in that situation of my not giving the approval. Secondly, can I also welcome Youth Councillor Carla, who's just arrived, and warmly welcome to a meeting. As Council will be aware, our Chief Executive is leading the organisation through major change, and as a consequence we have a number of new Executive Directors, and I particularly want to welcome Bridget Jolly to our Council meeting, and also KJ, who's been with us for some time, but to acknowledge that significant change in leadership. And also important for our Council is that our new Governance Manager, Rita Bento Allpress, is also joined us, and welcome her to our organisation and look forward to working with her. Now, the Chief Executive has made a completely unreasonable promise that I'm going to, I think he's made it to max, that I'm going to get the business through by midday. It isn't a big agenda, but there are some important issues there. Let's progress that. There has been no apologies. I'm sorry, Councillor Brand.
Well, I love the enthusiasm for early finish. If we could finish before 11, that'd be brilliant, because I need to go to an appointment at 11. Sure. My apologies for that.
Understand that, and that apology is recorded if required. And I just note for the minutes, if the meeting goes beyond 11 o'clock, record the apology. If the meeting doesn't go beyond 11, then it's not necessary for it to be recorded. I wish to confirm the order of business as per the agenda. Are there any particular interest related to today's agenda that any member needs to declare? There is none. There is no public forum. We have the minutes of the meeting of the 11th of December that have been circulated. Does anybody have any questions or concerns in regard to those minutes? That being the case, is Councillor Hodgson happy to move their adoption? And seconded by Councillor Courtney. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, say no. Those minutes are adopted. We come to my Mayor's report. The way I'd like to handle my Mayor's report is that it deals with 5 different issues. What I'd like to do is just give some overview comments to each of the 5 issues, take questions from elected members where they have them. I'm more than happy to divide up the resolutions if there is contentious, to allow separate debate on the different issues, because they are quite mixed. If there's pretty broad agreement, then just do it as a single debate, and I'll take your guidance collectively as to how you would like to handle that. The first item in my Mayor's report is the establishment of a new Nelsonian Civic Award. I say quite honestly, as Mayor, I am continuously amazed by the level of dedication and commitment that a large number of people in this community give in terms of service to our city. It might be in sport, it might be environmental groups, it might be in commerce, the arts, or the like. And I genuinely do not feel that we as a counselling community do as good a job as we could of saluting those champions. Now, our council has previously had some forms of civic awards. The combination of the huge disruption of COVID, add to that, not surprisingly, when I first became mayor, when you've got $100 million worth of damage, dozens of people out of homes, Storm took the priority. And as well as that, if I'm brutally honest, my view is that the relationships within council were not that great either around coming to a consensus that you need for these sorts of awards. Can I appreciate, I've had a lot of feedback from elected members as we've had an informal discussion about how this would work. My ambition is to try and keep the administration and the bureaucracy of it to a minimum, to maximise the recognition that we give to those that do great work within our community, and to do it in such a way that it, when we're under fiscal pressure, minimises the cost. It's my view that the best place to make these awards actually is at our regular council meetings. This is the formal democratic body in which we do it, and the awards will only be granted when there is a majority of the 13 members that agree that those awards should be made. But the nominations are to come from each of the 13 elected members, with the community freely able to contact either councillors directly or the Mayor and Councillor's office with the names they come forward. Now, I've actually got a huge level of confidence in 13 people around this table. It would be my ambition that all of the awards don't go just to sports groups or environmental groups or arts groups. And that's where it's a bit of a collective view across us to make sure that we get a really good, healthy mix of recognition across the community. It is the intention to run the system. Inevitably, when you are not indifferent to an employment process, the process of making and deciding who will get the awards needs to be a private process. And that is simply because I'm not going to have members publicly debating the relative merits of individuals as we go about providing this recognition of champions in our community. On the basis of previous discussions, I've drafted up a criteria that would be used, and it is my intention, just for councillors' information, that the order in which the nominations would come through would be in order of seniority, if I can call that, seniority being the members that have been the most experienced will be the first to provide the nominations up through the system. And over the course of the term, my expectation is that we would make 13 of these Nelsonian Civic Awards. The second item in my Mayor's report relates to the soft plastics curbside recycling scheme. I am hugely proud that Nelson's the first city in New Zealand to provide for a curbside plastics recycling. It was initiated by the Packaging Forum. It's been operating successfully. And I've actually been very pleasantly surprised by the level of commitment from those 1,000 households and 100 streets that have taken the scheme up. The difficulty for the council is that both operationally we're under pressure and financially. And we are not in a position in respect of our annual plan to expand that scheme or to consider it at this time. So the choice we face there is, do we continue with those 1,000 households while we go through our long-term plan process and decide whether we want to expand it, or the alternative is to end it? Myself and the Executive Director for Infrastructure and the Deputy Chief Executive met with the Packaging Forum. They're happy to continue to operate it at completely their expense till April. But then from April through to July 27 next year, we would cut the cost 50-50. So effectively, we're getting a 50% subsidy from industry for maintaining it for those 1,000 households. That would give us the opportunity, if we wished, through the long-term plan process, to look at as to whether we wanted to expand or what decisions we would then make about the scheme. The cost of doing so is quite small, $15,300 that would come out of our existing budgets around waste minimisation and recycling. There's one little complication. The government passed a standard nationwide code for recycling materials that excludes soft plastics. The reason the Packaging Forum were able to run the scheme over those 1,000 households over the last 15 odd months has been because the regulation only bounds councils. Now, because I'm proposing in my Mayor's report for council to be a 50% funder, for us to be compliant with the regulations, we need to get that exemption. I raised that with the Minister last year. The Minister has now made a formal process to be able to get exemptions to the curbside recycling standard. Those applications opened in January. I've had discussions with the Ministry. They say there's absolutely no difficulty. In fact, they are very supportive of the trial because they're wanting to see what further products can be extended nationwide. But there is a formal process that's noted in my report that the packaging forum with council would apply to the Ministry for the Environment, and we would not be able to provide the funding for our 50% share until that exemption had got through. And that's why, if we are to proceed with this, we need to proceed today. In the event that we decide not to proceed as per my recommendation, then it would be the packaging forum's intention to stop the trial. And that would also have the disadvantage of putting the Future Post business that's been established in Blenheim that uses our recycling material to manufacture those posts and bollards. It would reduce that supply, and there is some risk to that business if we made the alternative decision. I've noted in my report the third item is simply the very significant $12.9 million that the Marina Company and Council have been able to secure for the marina development. I do particularly want to acknowledge Nigel Skeggs in his work as the previous chief executive of the marina. I know our staff, yourself, Nigel, and your team worked very hard with the Marina Company. This is a very substantial contribution from government that enables us to be able to speed up the development of that marina. And I think it's of such a scale, it's worth noting in my mayor's report and thanking all those that will help us to secure it. I have noted in my mayor's report that this year is the 50th anniversary of the Miazu Sister City relationship. We should be very proud as a city that we were the second city only by 2 days to form a sister city relationship. It's interesting to observe the history in the 1970s when there was still a remnant of strong anti-gender party sentiment arising from World War II, and was actually quite bold of our community to say, actually, we're focused on the future and on peace. And if we look at the 50-year relationship with Miazu, I think it's pretty special. I've received an invitation as part of the 50th celebrations of that sister city relationship. I see this council's involvement in foreign affairs issues as being very small, but there is a role for us to play around, particularly in what I think is a pretty topsy-turvy world at the moment, for our community to continuing to assert the values of peace, respect for different cultures. And that sister city relationship is something that we do in that space that I think is constructive and is a heritage worth protecting. The last item in my agenda is the issue of the Remuneration Authority and the allowances for members. I have made quite plain that I think the Remuneration Authority has got it wrong when they think that ratepayers should pay for the travel allowances of members that live outside of the area. We had the very unusual situation of a person living in St Arnaud standing for this council. And if you added up what the costs would be to the council, if we approve this, it would be about $24,000 a year. You had even the bigger nonsense in Tasman next door of a person from Invercargill standing to be the mayor of that district. And the idea that automatically, I'm sorry, Mr. Chief Executive, you have no choice but to follow the direction of the Remuneration Authority. The idea that the ratepayers of a community would be paying for the humongous travel costs, not just travel, the vehicle costs, but the members' time, to me, does not make sense. Now, every one of our 13 elected members here is not affected by this currently because you all reside within the city of Nelson. But I do in my report note you'll be surprised by the number of times in which circumstances change with a person's life such that they may move. I do not rule out, if I win lotto, buying a place in Kaiteritiri for my retirement years. But should it... But if any one of us make a lifestyle choice during this 3-year term to move to Mapua or Kaiteritiri or Golden Bay, my view is that you should not be the cost to the ratepayer for that additional travel, and that is why I would like us to make that submission. That are the key 5 items in my mayor's report. I'm happy to take questions on any of them to me, and then what I'd like to do is get some guidance from members as to whether you prefer to debate all the items together or whether there are some specific issues that you would like to debate separately. Firstly, over to Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through the Mayor. I've got two things. First one is a question around the existing waste minimisation and recycling budget. If you're taking it from there, does that mean we are delaying or reducing a service elsewhere to free up? What actual impact does that have on current?
The advice I had from our Deputy Chief Executive was no. Approving the $15,000 for the soft plastics recycling scheme will not involve any reduction in any other recycling or waste minimisation activity that's currently being done. It's a very small amount relative to the overall budget, but I'd be more than happy for Alec Levertis to add to that very valid question.
And through the chair, nothing more to add. Those the amounts are small enough for us to be able to absorb that into the budgets.
Okay,
There's going to be no change.
So nothing's getting delayed or anything
No.
like that. Okay, so my second point is just around the sister cities. As the chair of that working group, I just want to acknowledge the importance of Nelson being represented at the 50th anniversary of our relationship with Miazu. The milestone is really a tribute to the volunteers of the Nelson Miazu Sister City Association who have maintained and strengthened this relationship on council's behalf for decades. Their commitment to exchanges, events and cultural connections is the reason this partnership continues to thrive on behalf of Nelson City Council. And while I'm unable to attend the delegation myself, disappointingly, I fully support the Mayor being present to honour that legacy and hope the volunteers who sustain it.
Thanks, Councillor Brand. Any other questions on my Mayor's report? Councillor Rollo.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. I have two questions as well. The first one's regarding the Civic Awards, and just a point of clarity. Did you say in your opening remarks that a group or a person could be nominated, or is it simply just a person?
No, the Nelsonian Civic Award is only for an individual. The criteria that I'm recommending, and perfectly open to have a range of views, is it can be a person of any age. It can be an example where a young person's done something extraordinary that would want to be recognised. It can be awarded up to 12 months after they have passed, but it's intended for relatively recent. It is not intended for, let's say you've got an organisation like a Rotary Club. No, it is not. It is for a person, not an organisation. I did give that some consideration, and there was a couple of councillors that had views, and I sort of talked it over, and we came to the view that it was best focused on an individual.
And I guess as well, you would have a sub to that as well. I still have another question on the soft plastics is you would expect this person to have been a volunteer rather than in a paid role?
The language is a little more loose than that, in the sense that it is in terms of community impact. And if I look at item 2C, focused on voluntary and philanthropic service on how the contribution has enhanced the city and the lives of others. So it's not ruling out, because I can think of examples where someone has had a paid role, but it is the focus of the non-paid contribution to the city that is there. And I, without speculating on examples, can think of people that, sure, they've had a paid role, but they've gone well and truly beyond that in their service to the city.
Thank you. And just regarding the soft plastics trial there, have the organisation looked at finding a new 1,000 homes to potentially take up the second part of this trial? They've had 1,000 households doing it already, but I just wonder, for it to get some positive uptake for other people in the community, are they interested or keen to explore doing it to a different 1,000 households?
The part that really surprised the packaging forum, and to some degree myself, when the trial was taken up, was they were expecting quite a low level of uptake. And in the original proposition, you may remember, they were hoping that there would be 25% of households that would opt in. Actually, they had 90% opt in. Now, the hard part with recycling schemes is getting people to change their habits. So they set aside the soft plastics and the wrappers rather than just tossing them into the rubbish. And so because we're financially strapped, the proposition at this point is not to extend it, just to retain what we've now put the hard work in and getting established where those households are doing it. There's a separate question for us And it will be one of the many issues we have to work through with the long-term plan. When we come to that long-term plan, we could make a decision to extend it across all 22,000 households within the city, but that will come at significant cost of the order of about 200 grand a year. We could make a decision to progressively, over the 10 years of the long-term plan, and 1,000 houses a year. And that might make some sense, because the issue with recycling is not just getting people to change their habits and collect it, but there are too many recycling schemes where you collect the stuff and then you've got nowhere for it to go. And so you might choose to do it in a progressive way as Future Post is able to grow the market for the products that come out the other end. Now, they're all choices for the future. The question for us today is, do we want to keep this national leading trial underway in the meantime while we think through those options? And my recommendation is yes, we should. And the other part is it's quite helpful that the industry is paying 50% of the cost. Councillor Austin.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So my question is about the out of town mileage and the vehicle mileage allowance. And in December last year, council has said that to be eligible for mileage, you have to be in a low emissions or a zero emissions car. And I'm just wondering whether that clause could be looked at for those living within the city limits, so that we use our, so that it could be a reimburse for any mileage in any car, not just an e-car.
Yes, just kind of firstly is the way this works, the Remuneration Authority independently sets parameters of which the council can pay elected members. Now, I think that's a really good system because I'm sorry, every one of us is conflicted. Then we come to the issue of our own policy. Now, the current Remuneration Authority allows mileage to be paid by council regardless of the vehicle. Mm-hmm. The previous council took a view, and it was even more odd than that, in that the mileage allowance from the Remuneration Authority is the bigger the vehicle. If you've got the juicy big V8, you got more than what you did if you had a puny wee 800cc car. And the previous council, as part of its climate change, chose to put in our policy that you would only get the mileage if it was a low emissions or zero emissions vehicle, but that councillors would have access to the council staff pool of low emission vehicles. So the issue on the agenda today is not our council policy. If we want to change our policy, that's entirely up to the 13 elected members. This is the issue of what the Remuneration Authority. But again, to be clear about your question, the Remuneration Authority does not limit the payment of mileage to elected members based on whether it is a low emission vehicle or not. That is a decision for council and our policy. Our current policy is only low emission vehicles. We would need to change that policy if we wished. And like I say, that is separate to the issue of what rules the Remuneration Authority sets down.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Skinner.
That just raises a good point. Our policy is different to the outer remuneration policy. So how do they two fit? We've got.
I'm sorry.
Our policy is different to the government's remuneration. That's set aside. So how does that fit with us? And so if we're getting remunerated, or council getting remunerated for specifics of travel, and then our policy is different.
Let me explain that. The Remuneration Authority effectively sets down things like pools or general rules. So, for instance, the Remuneration Authority does not say what the remuneration for councillors will be. It sets a pool and then gives us discretion.
Yep.
Exactly the same with the mileage allowance. They say, here's the maximum, but you set your own rules. And exactly the same whether it be around the security and the childcare and the other elements. Now, I'm perfectly open. If there is a group of councillors that would like us to reconsider the policy that was adopted in 2023 around only low emission vehicles, more than happy for us to have some informal discussion and a choice on that.
Okay. of interest in that because the city government providing some parameters, I think they should utilise that to its end rather than themselves. That's sort of, sorry, well, we should, well, speaker was off. I think it's a remuneration society organisation which is not coming out of ratepayers' money, but money coming from outside. We should utilise that to the best of its ability within reason. So
I'm sorry, and I'm not wanting to contradict you, but I also want it to be correct. The Remuneration Authority sets down the allowances, including for our salaries, remuneration,
we can't
allowances.
change that, and we can't.
That's right. But that is paid for by ratepayers. It is the ratepayers that pay these bills. Or the Remuneration Authority is setting down the regulations of what can be paid. So it comes out of Nigel's budget. If we all go zooming around and do lots more mileage, I'm sorry, Nigel's got to find the money and he doesn't get a choice.
Yep. Yeah, but just be clear, without what we get paid doesn't come out of ratepayers.
And including our remuneration as members is paid for by ratepayers.
All paid for by ratepayers.
Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Minik. Just regarding the soft plastics trial, we did resolve to further investigate that scheme for the annual plan and long-term plan. I do wonder if you've given any thought to what that might look like, because I would hope at some stage we'd have some kind of workshop and look at the issue not just in terms of waste management, but in terms of public and environmental health. And in the context of the Nelson Tasman Waste Minimisation Management Plan, I do think decision-making wise at some stage it has to come out of the Mayor's report and into a formal report. So just interested in your ideas of what that might look like leading up to our subsequent decision point. What kind of information will we have, and will that be a workshop and then a formal paper?
Good question, and I think the process looks like this. The first big picture questions we need to make collectively as a council is what is the relative priority of investment in infrastructure, transport services, arts, recycling, and all of those things, that high level of priority to our chief executive as to what's our priorities. Then that will give us a sense of how important is waste and recycling in our overall picture and plans for the city over the next 10 years. And then within that subgroup of waste and recycling, we need to go and look in terms of internally of that budget is what's our priorities. In other words, is the soft plastic recycling scheme the sensible next thing that we would do in terms of improved environmental management? And I'm very open with you, Councillor Stallard, that needs to be contestable. There might be other things in the recycling and waste space that would be a higher priority than this scheme. I openly accept that. The main reason I recommend the continuation of this trial is because once you've got people into the good habit of doing it, I don't like us going backwards. And so that's why my preference is keep the trial going. It's proving very successful. It's collecting a very large number, about 3 items of plastic per day per household that is not going off to landfill, and then give us the time with proper officers' report to look at the merits of that scheme relative to other priorities within waste and recycling.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, to clarify, I'm not so concerned at this stage about prioritisation and so on. I'm just seeking an assurance that for subsequent decision points, given that we want to make the best decisions possible, to my mind, it's essential we consider public environmental health issues and the decisions in the context of the plan we developed in the previous council term. So is that your intention as well, that we would look at it beyond just simply a waste management issue? Because I would, as a decision maker, I would like to have the public environmental health evidence there as well. What is the best way to deal with plastics once they're produced? And our plans do say go higher up the waste hierarchy. We should be trying to minimise at source, minimise the generation. I would hope that's the factor that we also consider. So will those factors, I'm asking, can those factors be included in any subsequent decision making?
The answer is yes. In the long-term plan, as we determine our priorities for the next 10 years, it needs to be a more robust process than has gone for this trial. But it is just that, it's trial. It's something that we are doing uniquely in the city on a nationwide basis and giving it a crack and see if we can make it work. I acknowledge that the process for it has not been as robust as something that goes through a full annual plan or a long-term plan process. On the other hand, all of the trial costs to date have been met by the Packaging Forum, no cost to the ratepayer. And sometimes you need to be nimble-footed and take opportunities when they arise to work with industry to deal with a waste issue. And that is the basis of which I've bought the report. It's a pragmatic way in which we can keep the trial going while we do those very robust processes that you wish us to do in making the bigger decisions long-term about waste management.
And just one final follow-up, if I can. I mean, this kind of information that might be provided to us, you know, there would be some input by a specialist waste advisor. Do we currently have a specialist waste advisor on council staff?
Through the chair, we don't.
So my understanding was that we did, who retired. Is there an intention to, is that position necessary to implement the plan that we developed in the previous council term?
As you know, Councillor Starr, we're going through a major review at the moment and looking at our org design, and we'll be taking that into account as we go through that process over the next 3 or 4 months.
The other part, my own personal preference, would be for us, given that we run our landfill together with Tasman, would be to do more of our waste minimisation stuff in partnership with them as well. It just seems to make sense when you've got a pretty contiguous urban area of Richmond, Stoke and Nelson, and what you do in waste in one area seems to make sense to do it overall. Mel. Oh, Councillor Courtney,
Thank you.
sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and thank you for your report, and particularly the first item. I'll retain my thoughts on that just till we get into discussion on it. I want to ask a question on 4, and what caught my eye was the wording here: agrees that a Nelson Civic Award will be presented about, that's the word, about every 3 months, because, Mayor Nick, I wonder whether that needs to be fairly flexible. Fairly flexible. I just wonder about every 3 months, but you've saved yourself here by saying about.
It is deliberately been to be a bit vague. The difficulty here, the first thing is that it is my expectation that over the term of this council, we would make 13 Nelsonian awards. Now, that would work out at about 4 per year, so roughly about 3 monthly. But you and I practically know that a person may not be particularly available on a particular date that may be the next council meeting. And so you may get some occasions where there's only a 2-month gap between them. And that's just us pragmatically working it through relative to people's availability and our own council working through the process of getting consensus. So what you probably wish to do is to put about underlined.
I don't really, in my mind, telling me that I want it to be open.
And that is certainly the intent, that's the word about.
Without putting a time, months on it and that type of thing. I didn't think we needed to go there, but that's just my thinking.
Look, I'm perfectly open, Councillor Courtney, if there was a better word. Would approximately be better?
I don't even want 3 months there. I want it to sort of evolve and come to the surface without having to sort of feel as though we're tying ourselves to 3 months. And now it's your turn, Councillor Paki. And now it's your turn. I want more.
I'm very happy. Agrees that the Nelsonian Civic Award will be presented by council to a recipient at its regular council meeting and remove the words about every 3 months. I was just trying to give some sense of, for the public that are reading the agenda, how it would work. But it's not intended as rigid. If it is the mood of council, just in terms of getting the formalities right, I'm more than happy to remove the words about every 3 months. Are people got any preference? Youth Councillor Trotter.
Thanks, Nick. I've just got another question about the Civic Award, and I was wondering if there's opportunities for the public to recommend nominations to elected members, and if so, how that would work.
Yeah, good question. The intention is that any member of the public could contact any one of the 13 elected members with suggestions. They can also directly go to the Mayor and Councillor's office with suggestions. And then it is intention that they would manage a pool, and that would be made available to all elected members to get a sense of those that are coming through. It is not intended. Some awards have a fixed close date, so you've got to have it in by a particular date. That is not intended with the relatively informal Nelsonian Civic Award that I am proposing through this report. Can I just resolve the question as to whether councillors would prefer? I took on board Councillor Courtney's suggestion about removing about every 3 months. Does anybody have any specific view on that? Councillor Skeggs, Councillor Brand, I'd just like to resolve it one way or the other.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. I'm comfortable with removing them, but I have concerns that now turns it into 12 or 11 awards with that, because it's now saying at a regular monthly meeting. So I'm happy to remove the 3 months, but I think we need to just wordsmith that a bit more.
Harabout agrees that 13 Nelsonian Civic Awards will be presented over the term.
Is that categoric though, Nick? Because if you say 13, it has to be 13.
Up to 13.
Because it may not be.
Excuse me, Mr.
Councillor,
Chair,
can I take Councillor Paki Paki
No,
and then
I
Councillor
think
Brand?
Councillor Brand was up first, but I think before we try to fine tune this,
Yeah.
can we hear what other people have to say just before, because we don't have to revisit it over and over again.
Sure. I just want to get a set of wording that all members are comfortable with on this issue. Councillor Brand.
Yeah, I'm happy for the words to stay, and my rationale behind that is, as the chair of it last term, and with all the different things happening and the financial constraints and trying to sort out the structure, it got missed under the priorities of other things. And therefore, if we remove the reminder, because that's how I see this, as a reminder about every 3 months we will have this. It doesn't get lost in the noise of, especially when we're doing LTB consultations and other things, as has happened previously.
I think that point is well made. I think you're erring me away from Councillor Courtney's position with respect. Councillor Paki Paki.
Yeah, Kapai. My thoughts around it is that doing it in priority of those who are most experienced, there is a little bit of an issue there with you may not have someone. It's your turn to pick someone, but you don't necessarily have someone who you think that you really would. And then a 3-year term is long. You might get to the end of the term, and there's someone that you really think should have this award, but also there's a latency period there where you are further down on the list in terms of who you would be able to nominate, and that person's actions really reach a pinnacle at the start of that year, and then you're like 2 years later you're sort of going, we're going to acknowledge what happened a couple of years ago. I'm not really proposing anything, but I do think that having the 3 monthly is probably not great, but could we just have at the end of the year those nominations, we can approve them prior as and when they come up. And if someone doesn't necessarily have someone that they want to nominate or can propose someone, then they don't have to just for the sake of it. And that could go into a conversation with one of the other councillors who really does have a great candidate that could go in for those periods. It's not it's not a complete solution or a fix, but thoughts for the mix.
The piece is, while I've indicated to council that my intention was to issue the invitation for the nominations in order of seniority, you'll note that's not in the resolution, and that is quite deliberate for the very reasons that Councillor Paki Paki has just mentioned. If I had a colleague that came along and said, look, there's this very significant person and I've canvassed it with a majority of council and we really want to recognise them and to adjust that order, it has that flexibility and is, my view is there's a very good working relationship between the 13 members to apply a bit of that sort of common sense flexibility around the way in which we would apply that. I still do wish to resolve the issue about the 3 months. I think on having heard Councillor Brand and noting Mal's concern, I think I will stick with the wording as originally intended and just emphasise that the about is just that. And the reason I'm taking Councillor Brand's advice on this is I do think it is useful, as she says, for this just not to fall, because there's so many other busy issues that come on the agenda, that our staff, particularly in the Mayor and Councillor's office, are focused on trying to identify every 3 months, roughly, a person to come through the system. And so I'm going to revert back to the original wording, but take on board Councillor Courtney's concern in that regard. That being the case, can I just check my preference, having completed the process of questions on the Mayor's report, is to simply take it as one resolution? Does anybody object to me moving items 1 to 9 as one resolution? I will so move from the chair. Is somebody prepared to second? Thank you, Councillor Brand. My report is now open for debate. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mendak. I could speak to each one of them, but I'll speak to this first one, the Nelson Civic Award, and commend you for this initiative, if it has arisen from your thinking, Mendak. I'm not sure that it has or whether it has, but I'm commending you for this initiative because I think this community of ours could not function without our volunteers. And so to recognise here publicly from a council position, volunteerism is incredibly important. Now, none of these people that we'll put forward will want to be recognised. They won't want to be. They're not that type of person. They really aren't. They will be embarrassed to some extent, I suggest to you. They will be. But it's shining a light on them, whether they expect it or not. But it is good that we as community leaders just pause, as Councillor Brand has confirmed, every 3 months and acknowledge these people. And I commend you for it, Mayor Nick. And I think it will build a lot of goodwill and could even build the number of volunteers in the wider community, knowing that their work is going to be acknowledged at some point or is acknowledged. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Courtney. I've got Councillor Matty on Zoom.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm supportive. Just in regards to the soft plastics, so I do find the packaging forum to be interesting bedfellows, and I would like to agree with Councillor Stallard. Minimisation is not really in their business model, I'd imagine, but I do work a lot with schools and they collect soft plastic, so I am supportive, but would like to dig into this a little deeper at some time in the future.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Any other contributions? Councillor Stallard.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. And just to follow up on what Maddie's just said, I would like to, given that plastics are carcinogens and endocrine disruptors and have other adverse health effects for humans and other species, I think it's critical that that's part of our decision making when it comes time for the next steps. So I will support what's here before us, but just say that for me, the next steps, depend on that strong, public environmental health lens being brought over it, acknowledging that this scheme is not recycling, it's reuse. Recycling is great because it reduces material input through our economy. And I would be reluctant to support anything that isn't tied to reduction, any commitment to reduce generation at the source. A scheme like this will probably result in increased plastics generation because households will think, previously we were concerned about the effects of plastics in the environment and so on, but there's a recycling scheme, it must be being taken care of. And it might turn out when we have appropriate information that this is the best way to deal with plastic that's already in the system, the safest way, or it might not. Landfill might even be safe in a lined landfill and so on. So we'll support it today, but would hope to get a lot more comprehensive sort of information next time it comes to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stallard. Any other comments? Exercising my right of reply, just on the question around the soft plastics, we need to be careful that we don't let the good be the enemy of the perfect. We all might want to live in a world of which there are no soft plastics and that there are alternatives to it. As a council, the levers that we have available to us to be able to radically change the way in which products are packaged is relatively limited. We're a city of 53,000 people in a nation of 5 million and a massive global market. And there might be a time in future when alternatively there are plastics that are developed that are not manufactured from hydrocarbons that are able to decompose more quickly, and I look forward to that day. But for the foreseeable future, there is going to be a large amount of soft plastics in our community, millions and millions. And the question is, should we pragmatically try as hard as we can to stop those going into landfill and recycling them where possible? And I'm a strong supporter of this pragmatic scheme. And not only do I want to see those 1,000 households continuing to recycle their soft plastics, I also want to be an advocate in the community for the other households to collect their soft plastics up and to place them in places like the warehouse and our supermarkets where you're able to do so, to reduce the overall amount of waste that is going to landfill. We're talking about things like bread bags and frozen food bags, and even those of you that receive our local newspaper, the Nelson Mail, will know that it comes in a plastic bag for the practical reasons that otherwise it gets very wet and you can't access it. And so this is a pragmatic view that in the meantime, plastics are likely to be used, and while we use them, we should try and recycle them. Again, can I just, in closing, in my right of reply, thank councillors for their support around the Civic Awards, particularly Councillor Courtney, but every councillor has been very supportive of this proposition, and I think collectively, as a council, there is an opportunity for us to be able to recognise that amount of good in our community and acknowledge every one of the elected members that has been supportive of that Civic Awards initiative. Councillor Courtney, you said that it was my initiative. That is an overstatement. Actually, a number of members came to me and said we needed to do something better in this space. And so I do want to emphasise that the Civic Awards is a council initiative, not a mayoral initiative. That's my right of reply. I'm getting the message from councillors. I'll allow a little bit of self-indulgence to go outside standing orders before I put the 9 resolutions.
I just talking privately to my colleague here, my friend Ollie.
Mic on, please, Mel, so that Matty can hear you.
I was talking quietly, I think, to my colleague, Kahu Pakipaki, and I said, I wonder if the people around this table, they won't know, Kahu, that in actual fact, when the Miatsu Sister City scheme was decided, that I was actually on council at that time.
It's last century.
And
you were on council last.
I used to like that. I used to like that guy, but I'm going off him quickly. But anyway, also member of parliament. So I was heavily involved in that action. I don't remember any community dissatisfaction with it. I thought it went through quite peacefully and harmoniously and supported by the community generally. Yeah.
I'm pleased I did give you that opportunity because it is very significant this year, that 50th relationship and the way in which our community appropriately recognises. And when you think of the horror of World War II and that decision in 1976 to be one of the very first cities in the world to form a sister city relationship with Japan has laid the foundations for peace in the Pacific that we long hope continues. I'm now going to put those 9 resolutions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. That is carried. Come to the next item on the agenda, which is the community funding, and invite Mark and Bridget before council.
We want to take a break.
Kia ora, councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to present this report this morning. You recall last year, council decided to set up a committee to allocate both the Community Investment Fund and the Community Events Funds. So this report's before you today to establish the structures, delegations and the terms of reference. I'll take the report as read and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, officers. The report sets it out very clearly and is consistent with the decisions that we made last year about the mix of both elected member and community member representation around the important allocation of these funds. I would note in you presenting the report that it actually is a very challenging role for the chair and members of the committee because there's always more demand than what there is funding. but I support the report and the work that's been done to fulfil the elected members' change in this regard. Any questions for our staff? Happy to be moved by Councillor Rollo. Happy to second by Councillor Courtney. Very efficient. There are no questions and no debate, then I'll simply put the resolutions that are on page 24 of our agenda, resolutions 1 to 5.
Maybe debate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't personally, but somebody might.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor. Does anybody wish to, officers are clear? There are no questions. There's only a question of the motion's been moved and seconded. Is anybody wishing to debate the 5 resolutions?
I don't know whether that's an invitation from Councillor Stella. Or why on earth did you raise it?
There we go.
No, I'm not going to be tempted. Look, it's the report. The report is what you'd call fulsome, and I don't think it needs any extra explanations following it.
The motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, say no. That is carried. We now come to item 6.3. Invite Michelle and KJ in respect of the proposed amendment for the car share operation policy. Welcome, KJ and team. Look forward to any opening comments you want to make around this report, and then we'll open up for questions.
Good morning, councillors. The report in front of you concerns a proposal to amend a car sharing operation policy. It's a fairly simple and straightforward one for councillors, I consider. The policy, as it was developed in March of 2024, has a duration maximum for agreements of 2 years. It's a very short window for operators to have investment certainty over any decisions that they make. And we would like to adjust the policy so that the duration of the contractual terms can be changed from the 2-year minimum as it sits currently to a maximum approval term of 10 years.
Pretty straightforward. Any questions? Councillor Rollo?
Ms. Mennick, I was just going to actually ask how the scheme's operating, given we are looking to extend it. I can assume it's going well, but for the operator, has it been a success?
The scheme is still in its very early days, and as such, we would need to come back to councillors with a formal evaluation in due course. But we do know that the duration of the term as it currently sits is a barrier for future investment decisions. So we are trying to create an environment which is conducive for car share operators, and we see this as being a really straightforward enabler for councillors that won't have adverse effects for the community.
Any other questions? Councillor Stella?
Thanks, Mennick. Thanks for the report. The assessment every 2 years, what powers does council have under that to alter the original contract?
So we'll just need to refer to the detail of the actual policy for that one, councillor, and I'll call on Michelle to provide some further detail.
Thank you. Through the chair, the 2-year assessment would be against performance of the car share operator, as well as whether the operator is still contributing to the objectives of the policy. And in the policy itself, on page 5, it sort of sets out the detail that council may, by resolution, change the designation that's been provided for a car share operator or the parking concession. So in that 2-year assessment, those are the types of considerations that would take place.
So potentially we could terminate and we could do that outside of these changes anyway, like at any time if the operator's not meeting the objectives, but just formalise that every 2 years. Okay, and what has the feedback been from potential operators? Have they expressed specific concerns about the 2 years, and that's a known that's a barrier to them?
Councillor, we just have to be a little bit careful there because we start to strain some of the commercial conversations that take place, and we want to preserve the confidentiality for commercial operators. But like any investment decision, when a private operator has to invest in capital equipment, and let's just say the example might be hypothetically electric vehicle charging arrangements and the like, when they have such a short contractual window, that lack of investment certainty makes it really hard for an economic case to stack and for the investment decision to be a viable one. So from that perspective, providing that certainty over being a private operator, being able to spread their costs over an extended period really is very beneficial. So, and in line with what council's trying to achieve in this space.
Yeah, understood. And one more, if I might.
Sure.
What possible risks are there to council for the longer time period? For example, how many car park spots do we have assigned to this scheme at the moment? And might it risk our flexibility in how we design this or rejuvenate the central city and so on?
Councillor, I described the scheme that we have at present as just still in its very early days. We are essentially sort of piloting and developing it as we go through. At the moment, there are 6 car parks, a maximum of 6 car parks provided for one operator at present. These are commercial arrangements that have to be developed in due course, but within those, what we're trying to do is to secure arrangements that are both beneficial to the private operator, but also in line with council's requirements and the community interests as well. So there are balance and trade-offs which will be worked through as we enter into negotiations with operators going forward.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor Courtney?
Thank you, Mayor Nick. KJ, thank you for your report. Do you think a 2-year permit is adequate for these commercial operations? Should that not be extended as well, the opportunity to extend the life of the permit?
Well, that's what we do.
That's councillor, that is essentially what we're trying to do. And look, I would say for someone coming new to the policy, some of the terms that we use in our policy, the policy document itself that we signed up for in March last year are a little bit confusing. But what we're essentially getting at is we're looking for a contractual term which has a maximum of 10 years rather than 2 years, because we do consider the 2-year duration to be inadequate.
Well, that's good. But how many would you take into your fold, operators? Is it open to a range of operators or just one particular?
It's certainly open for anyone to make an application and to work with us at this point. We're only working with a very small number of providers at this point in time.
How many are you working with at the moment?
Just one moment.
It's news to me. I didn't realise they'd have more than perhaps one provider.
Councillor, there is one provider at present that is publicly sharing their plans for Nelson in a public information space. But what we want to make sure is that we have created an environment that's really attractive to other operators as well. And the short duration that we have under our policy at the moment of only 2 years is a very real barrier to other interest from other providers. So in order to adopt a facilitatory approach and to encourage others into the space, we really want to extend that term, and we will evaluate the agreements on a case-by-case basis to make sure that the outcomes are great for Nelson.
All right.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, online.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering about, so you mentioned that some of the information is commercially sensitive. 2 to 10 years seems a lot, and I'm not opposed to that. But as far as us being able to measure what kind of community benefit we're getting and making decisions on its worth, are we going to get information in the future around how this policy is benefiting the community in and around disruption around, you know, how people travel and whatnot?
Thank you, Councillor. Just a point of clarification. We're looking for a maximum approval term of up to 10 years. So 10 years is not a guaranteed right for anyone to apply for. We would evaluate each application on its merits. So I think that's a really important note, but we do think that that longer time window is important for operators that need to make capital investments. In terms of the policy itself, we are obviously in its early stages of development and implementation, and that it was only approved last year in March. And the policy does have a requirement that the policy review occurs every 2 years.
Okay, Matty?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, will we get access to the information around, uptake, how many miles, how many trips? You mentioned that information isn't available or commercially sensitive around us making decisions on how much the community is benefiting from the scheme when we decide to approve.
Thank you, Councillor. It is our expectation that that information will be available to councillors when we go through the evaluation of the policy.
Councillor Pakipaki.
I may have missed it. The policy itself, we approve the policy. The execution of the approvals is done by officers of council, or does that come back to council itself, elected members?
It comes to council.
So this is the whole, when we talk about council approves, it's all through elected member process.
Yes.
I'm going to move from the chair the recommendation. I understand that Councillor Hodgson is happy to second. In speaking to this, can I thank officers for their report? This is a really challenging but equally exciting area in my view. I think we are going to see over the next decade or two quite radical changes in the way in which motor vehicles are used and the way in which they're organised. And it's quite a difficult role we play as council in terms of how do we sort of facilitate it in an uncertain environment. I, for one, think that in our lifetime we are going to see driverless vehicles, and with driverless vehicles will be a radical change in car ownership and how all that works. The part and council staff did a good job in getting our policy around car sharing, but Matty was on the money when he asked the question around where is the community benefit? Why should we treat a company like Mevo any different to what you treat Avis, who runs rental cars? Just because you're booking it online, you do it different. And the answer comes around back to the core question of climate change and emissions. In my view, the core reason for us to be involved in facilitating the development of options like car sharing is that we want to get emissions down. And if that is the case, I do want our staff to negotiate in the conditions around car sharing operators that are being given beneficial space, car parks that we know are quite expensive, a requirement for them to use low emission vehicles. Now, the problem that has essentially led to this report is that if you are the car sharing company and you're being asked to invest anything like $6,000 to $10,000 in putting electric charging onto your car sharing site, then you're not going to spend that money for just 2 years. And so you need to extend that period out. And that is why I am so supportive of the recommended change. You may not need to go all of 10 years, but we're giving the council staff the flexibility to go out to that 10-year period. Now, you might be the devil's advocate and say, well, why don't we go longer than 10? Why don't we make it 20? The reason I think 10 is the right answer is that over the period of 10 years, particularly with the evolution of technology, and you've all seen what Uber has done in various cities around the world and now in Nelson, I don't know where all those technologies are going to go. It is possible within 10 years we might have the evolution of driverless cars and having a whole number of other regulatory issues that we might to see through. So my hope in council adopting this recommendation from our council staff is that we will give them the capacity to be able to include in our car sharing agreements between the Nelson City companies and companies like Mevo is clear targets around moving to low emission vehicles, and them, not the ratepayer, then having the confidence to invest in the sort of technology around electric cars. I confess I have a slight interest. I had an embarrassing day yesterday when my little electric car ran out of charge and I had to get out some leads and the council staff to get it charged up. And we are going to need to grow the network of electric chargers in our city. By making this change, what we are doing is enabling to grow recharging stations without costing the ratepayer, but through the way in which we contract with these car sharing companies. Are there any other comments? That being the case, I'll put the resolution and recommendation from our staff to extend the maximum approval term for our car sharing contracts of up to 10 years. Those that are in favour will say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. That is carried. I thank our staff for our work on that issue. We now come, and I think this has set a record, such a good record that I think the Chief Executive owes the Mayor and Councillor a shout. We move to item 7, which is the exclusion of public business. Could be premature, because the Deputy Mayor is going to debate at length the last motion, which is to exclude the public for the reasons set out in 48.1 for Council to be able to deal with confidential business. It's being moved by Councillor Pakipaki. It's being seconded by Councillor Courtney. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, say no. We're going to take a 10-minute coffee break. Council will resume at 10:18.